Hello, my name is Nick, and this is my presentation for Chemistry 2801. The name of this presentation is Carbon Dioxide's Effects on the Global Climate and the Ambitions of the Paris Agreement. The topic of the presentation is climate change, with discussion about albedo and the Paris Agreement as they relate to climate change. Climate change. Greenhouse gases in the atmosphere play a part in what the average global temperature is because those are the materials that can absorb infrared radiation from the sun. Changes to the concentrations of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere is raising the global temperature. A rise of global temperature influences the global climate. The greenhouse gas effect is the process whereby energy from the sun reaches the earth and warms the atmosphere. Infrared radiation enters the greenhouse gas molecules and changes their vibrational states. The vibrations stretch and bend the bonds between the atoms in the structures. Carbon dioxide and methane are greenhouse gases that are susceptible to these actions because their molecular structures are weak enough for infrared radiation to cause vibration. These molecules absorb and emit radiation with other molecules in the atmosphere, and their collective vibrations are what keeps the atmosphere warm. Greenhouse gases accumulate in the atmosphere from anthropogenic sources. The added amount of greenhouse gases traps more infrared radiation in the atmosphere than normal, warming the global atmosphere. The combustion of chemical fuels associated with industrialization, for example, coal, ethane, ethanol, octane, and hydrocarbons, involves a process in which carbon from the fuels combines with oxygen in the atmosphere to form carbon dioxide molecules. Industrial activity involving the combustion of chemical fuels releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Adding carbon dioxide into the atmosphere allows for larger amounts of greenhouse gases to warm the atmosphere. Data about the last quarter of the 20th century shows a quick ascent in global temperature, and carbon dioxide concentrations are rising from about 340 parts per million in 1980 to about 390 parts per million in 2010. Data about the temperature of the global atmosphere indicates a close correlation between global temperature and anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions. The presence of more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and the warming global climate together suggests that carbon dioxide emissions from human activity is warming the temperature of the atmosphere. The temperature of the oceans will rise, causing observable changes in warmer local weather patterns across the globe and worsening as time goes on. A warmer atmosphere will cause the ocean to become warmer, and a warmer ocean will sequester less carbon dioxide from the air. A change in the characteristic of the atmosphere has already been attributed to anthropogenic carbon dioxide. The resulting warmer atmosphere will warm the ocean, and the warmer ocean will be less effective at regulating carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, causing carbon dioxide levels to rise and continue warming the atmosphere. Many processes of weather and climate occur under the influence of the atmosphere and the ocean. Temperature is an important constant in the systems that determine long-term weather patterns. The temperature of the global atmosphere is rising, and this can have different effects on local climates. Global atmospheric and oceanic warming caused by the release of anthropogenic carbon dioxide is changing the temperature of the atmosphere. Albedo. The global temperature has risen, and now the permanent ice cover at the poles of the globe is beginning to melt. The decline of permanent ice cover at the caps of the globe lowers the albedo of the area where the ice cover was lost, and the loss of high albedo area contributes to the warming of the atmosphere. Albedo is a measurement of light energy that an object reflects. Lighter colors have a higher albedo, darker objects have a lower albedo. Open water reflects only 8% of the solar radiation that strikes it, absorbing the remaining 92% as heat. Fresh snow carries an albedo of 95%, meaning just 5% of the solar radiation that contacts fresh snow is reflected into space. In the Arctic summers, permanent ice cover has not high albedo, so it reflects the sun's energy and prevents the sun from warming the Arctic Ocean to temperatures that can melt the ice. If there is no ice covering the Arctic Ocean, much more solar radiation is absorbed by the surface of the Earth and not reflected into space. Human activity involving the emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is warming the atmosphere and the oceans, causing polar sea ice to melt. When the permanent polar sea ice melts, the area that was once covered with ice becomes open water. In the absence of snow and ice cover in the Arctic, the albedo of the region lowers, and the area is thus more conducive to the absorption of heat. The temperature of the Arctic Ocean rises above normal, and as a result, more sea ice melts, warming the oceans and the atmosphere further. The Arctic Ocean is much cooler than other parts of the globe, especially those that are closer to the equator. Arctic temperatures play a massive role in regulating the temperature of the atmosphere and the other oceans in the northern hemisphere. Runaway warming in the Arctic, therefore, has profound effects on the long-term weather patterns of the globe and therefore the climates of arguably the entire planet. The Paris Agreement is a document that was signed by world leaders under the direction of the United Nations in 2015 to address an impending climate disaster. Limiting the rate at which the global atmosphere will warm and reducing anthropogenic carbon dioxide emissions are the priorities of the agreement. If the signatories of the agreement adhere to their commitments, then human activity will be of much less disturbance to the global climate. As the temperature of the atmosphere continues to rise, the United Nations suggests that all of the leaders of the world should commit their attention to lowering greenhouse gas emissions within each of their territories. The signatories are expected to work with other countries to substantially reduce global greenhouse gas emissions to limit the global temperature increase in this century to 2 degrees Celsius, while pursuing efforts to limit the increase even further to 1.5 degrees. It is generally agreed that a rise in global temperature of any more than 2 degrees Celsius is something that must be avoided in this century. This suggests that human activity that involves the combustion of chemical fuels from non-renewable resources should not be practiced for the ambitions of the Paris Agreement to be met by the world. The United Nations expects dedication to this agreement. Part of the Paris Agreement is that there will be a review of the countries' commitments to cutting emissions every 5 years. The Paris Agreement is a commitment to the United Nations and other signatories that the countries who agree will need to make an active effort to record the resources of the country that are allocated to reducing their carbon footprint. Each additional 5 years, each country will need to demonstrate the transitions from petroleum combustion energy to renewable energy sources the country has made. The framework the United Nations is creating is an attempt to guide the world to stop emitting carbon dioxide. If the world reaches the United Nations' targets to replace non-renewable energy sources, then there will be much less damage caused to the atmosphere.